Welcome everyone.
Dowser Mastermind Conference Call. These talks, lasting for about an hour, are open to everyone and scheduled for the third Monday of the month at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Today is the 19th of October, 2020. I'm G from Northern California Dowsers in Redding, California. Jeanette and I will be joining your hosts, Sherry Hope and Ed Stillman, for tonight's program featuring Clay Smith. This will be recorded and accessible at ASD's website under the Members Only section. Thanks for holding your questions until they're called for. And now I'm turning the program over to Sherry Hope.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the American Society of Dowsers Water Dowsers Conference Call. And this is our third year. Actually, we're almost ending our third year, going into the fourth year. So thank you all for coming on and supporting us. Tonight, of course, we're going to have Clay Smith, and I don't know if you know, but you probably all have the Letter to Robin, and Clay made the charts for the Letter to Robin books. And we've got a few announcements before Clay comes on. And first of all, Susan Spooler, would you like to make an announcement about an upcoming conference? Just remember, you got to unmute yourself, Susan.
There we go. Hi. Thank you for having me. This is Susan McNeil Spooler, president of the Boston Dowsers, and also co-director of the West Coast Conference, as well as the Flagstaff Dowser Conference. Flagstaff Dowser Conference, we're getting geared up for that. And that'll be October 6th to the 13th in Flagstaff, Arizona, at the Little America Hotel. Our website is www.dowserssouthwest.com. We'll be adding more and more information as it becomes available. So we'll look forward to having everybody that wants to come attend the event. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Susan. Okay, Sharon Mahaney has a couple of announcements about the digest. She is one of the editors of the digest. So let's see, Sharon, are you on the line? You might be muted, so you'll have to unmute yourself. Okay, Sharon Mahaney, are you on? You know, it's star 6.
Hi, sorry about that. I punched the wrong numbers.
Okay, that's all right.
All right, so I just wanted to mention that for the American Society of Dowsers Digest, the quarterly journal, we're looking for a few things. First of all, if you have a photograph of yourself with a device, meaning a dowsing tool, we're going to do a collage of photos in the future. So if you have that and would like to send it our way, send that to editor@dowsers.org. The other thing is I'm looking for articles for future digests, and our next digest is going to have a little bit of a food theme. So if you have any stories you'd like to tell or an article, it can be anything actually, but if it's related to food, it would fit right in. So maybe you douse your food when you're choosing it or when you're eating it or whatever. Food-related or dowsing-related articles, again, send those to editor@dowsers.org. And I'm hoping to get those in by the third week of November, if possible, the due date, in order for me to get it into the winter digest. Anyway, thank you for anything you want to offer.
Thank you, Sharon. Sharon does a great job on the digest. Thank you so much, Sharon. You spend a lot of time on that. Okay, so make sure you take pictures or have someone take a picture of you using a dowsing instrument or just holding the dowsing instrument. And, she can put that in the collage for the next digest. So send them in as soon as you can because they have they have processes they have to go through in order to get them into the digest. And especially articles, they do a lot of editing, and that takes a lot of time, so send those in as soon as possible. I have a friend, actually. She passed away. She's a skydowser now. She passed away last month, and her name was Alice Gervin. We call her Allie Gervin. And I met her back in, the late 70s. And so we used to do a lot of dowsing together, and she was actually co-founder of the Gold Country Dowsers, our group here in Oroville, California, she and Walt. And she was amazing because she had a dowsing tool in every room of her house. And she had one next to each phone. She had corded phones. And she would douse when somebody called. And so she was very interesting. And whenever we went to, like, a restaurant, then she would douse the menu, douse her food. She would put the pendulum over her drink, and she would take out any detrimental energies and bring in the beneficial energies for her. So she was an amazing dowser. Now I have my son Dan Hope. I'm going to have him come on. He actually does my maps for me. He'll enhance them on his computer and then sends them to the printer, and I get these gorgeous maps to douse, and they're so clear with a lot of detail, and my clients are very happy with the detail on the aerial views. And then I douse out where the water veins are and the best well sites before I go out to the property. Saves me a lot of time. So Dan, *6 there, unmute yourself so you can come on.
Okay. Thanks, Mom. Yeah, I create the maps with property lines and everything, and then I've been printing 12 by 18s for, and there are other possibilities. I just was thinking the other day I probably should do them for some other people if anybody else really needs it. I believe, as my mom said, I think you said we could just put a link on there on your page, and we can figure something out. I will put my contact information, and somebody can get a hold of me if they decide they want to do that. Go ahead, Mom. I'm not sure what else to say exactly.
Okay, yeah, I could put that on the web page. I have my other friend David put it on.
Yeah, maybe we could put a sample of one on that. Maybe that'd be a good way to do it.
Oh, okay, that's a good idea. Okay. So my webpage is sherryhope.com. So SHARRYHOPE.com.
Okay. Anything else?
So I guess not. I guess we'll update on the webpage, and I give you a page on there.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, if anybody really wanted, I can do up to practically wall size, like 10 foot by something like around 6 or 7 feet or something to that effect. If somebody really, really wanted. Okay.
Wow.
Bye.
Bye. Okay. Thanks, Dan. All righty. Cool. Great.
Yeah. Clay, are you there yet?
Yes, right? I'm here.
Okay. So we can hear each other if we're going to be helping along here a bit. So, good deal.
Okay. So, Ed, I guess it's time to introduce our guest speaker, Clay Smith.
Okay. All right. Well, most of you are familiar with Clay Smith, the audiovisual guy at the conferences, the go-to guy for electronics, computers, video, and off-the-grid architectural design and these are the specialties of Clay. And what happens now is we find out that Clay is a lifetime member of the American Society of Dowsers. So here's some information. When Clay was a teenager, around 13 years of age, he started experimenting with dowsing. He was familiar with people who used dowsing to find water, but he was also curious to find out what else you could use dowsing for. Between the age of 13 and 20, Clay used different methods of dowsing. With practice, Clay found that he was able to distinguish between water lines, sewer lines, phone lines, electric lines, utilities, and other items. This ability has helped him in his different jobs and adventures. At 20 years of age, Clay worked at Cray Research Company, and he actually was working there and used their computers to learn about the Cray computing machines. He also worked with several other companies involving fiber optic research and development, electronics, and bank computers. In 1990, Clay attended his first West Coast conference sponsored by the American Society of Dowsers. In 1992, he attended the West Coast Conference All-Day Dowsing School and received a certificate of completion from John Wayne Blassingame and Tody Geringer. Since then, he has used dowsing to locate lost items, utilities, oil and gas, gold, and just about anything else that he could think of or needed to. Clay is also excellent as a map and remote dowsing abilities. And this is only a small part of what Clay has accomplished over the years. So Clay, please proceed with your guest speaking discussions, and good luck.
Okay. Well, I guess where we can, lead on from is, getting into dowsing and gaining confidence as I was able to practice more with the utility dowsing, and then hone in on being able to distinguish between the different utilities. At first, it was a little frustrating when I'd be looking for a particular utility and be getting all these other indications and follow them, and only to find it was the wrong one. So then I got into learning to focus on the particular one I was looking for, and to then discriminate against the others so that they would not give me a response. And so I always traveled around with L-rods in my vehicles, and it was in 1990 that when I was doing some consulting work there in the Silicon Valley, that heading out to lunch and putting tools away and things, somebody spotted the L-rods in the trunk and asked about it, and being a dowser, and told me about American Society of Dowsers putting on the conference there in Santa Cruz, and that's how I came to know about ASD and went to the first conference. And it was so great to learn that there are so many others out there and hear of their experiences and how similar some of them were to mine, and then take what I've already discovered and grow on that and experience other areas, such as getting more into the well dowsing, being that I haven't had the opportunity to actually go beyond just experimenting and feeling and detecting things to actually having wells drilled and seeing things come through. So it was great working with people like John Wayne Blassingame and Tony and others that were already established, going out in the field doing that, and being able to go along with them and then gain confidence in that as well. So that was quite interesting being able to do that, and then progressed on through the 90s and on into past 2000, and I was putting in a solar and wind system out at this business that was 8 miles from the nearest town and over a mile from the closest utility lines. And there was a well driller working out there, putting in a well where it was convenient, and had questions on it. So I filled him in on what I was detecting, and sure enough, they hit it where I told them at the depth as they were going. And at first he was so skeptical about it. I asked him when I first met him if he was into dowsing or worked with any dowsers, and he just kind of laughed and he said, "Well, various customers bring in a dowser ahead of time, but I really don't know what to think of it," and pretty skeptical. And then I filled him in on what I did, and then proceeded with the information on that well. And at first he was saying, usually I would tend to want to turn and run away, but seeing this electrical system and all that you just put in, and that you definitely know something, I'm curious to hear your take on it and what you know. And so I was able to educate him more on it, and then give him a set of rail rods to write their experiment and see that he get the same indications I was, and still he's not too sure about doing it himself. Doesn't have quite an open mind, but when I'm with him, he's able to, reasonable. And so he still calls me once in a while with questions on different ones he's working on. But one thing that was kind of fun was, I think it was around 2003, give or take, that then this owner of this crop dusting business, who I put in this remote system, wanted to put in an almond orchard on 2 quarter sections of land, half a square mile, and needed an irrigation well that would provide at least 1,500 gallons a minute. And so just drawing out a map of the area, I got an idea of what area we should go to, and to actually pinpoint it. And then we got in a pickup and went out and to that area and found the location, and then I noted what depth and what they would be locating along the way. And here again, the wheel driller was a little skeptical of all the details of what I was giving him down through the different depths. And even while I was working on it, I happened to call Ed Stillman and see if he was remotely detecting a lot of the same information I was, and he verified a lot of it, so it's just helpful. And so he went ahead and went on to drilling the well, and was in the process of it even when then I had to leave there to go to the Southwest Conference. And when I was out at the conference, then he called me about when they completed it and did brought in a test pump that could do at least double that. And it's a 16-inch casing for this irrigation well, and they test pumped it at 3,000 gallons a minute, which was surprising. And usually it'd be hard to have any place to put that water. But just up the hill from this was an irrigation ditch that came through that they weren't accessing for this orchard, for it was all a drip system and needed very pure water. But it gave them a place to deposit this water when test pumping. So they didn't just have to flood a field. 50 gallons a minute. So he was quite happy to get the test pump double what he was needing. And so it was quite interesting to see that come through. And then this individual's brother bought an adjacent quarter section of land to do the same thing. And they just take things for granted and just wanted the well to be conveniently located in the center of this section of land for the irrigation system. And so without calling me, they just said, it's there, we see how much water in this example was available. And they just assumed it was going to be wherever they drilled. And they discovered that it doesn't work that way. One, it had much more difficulty in drilling with all the rocks and such. And two, even when they got down to that depth, they couldn't get near that quantity of water. So it's interesting for me to see that too, where people do these things. And And even seeing this work, they just tend to take it for granted, which is sad. But anyway, it's been quite interesting to see these come through this way. And I don't know how much I should diverse from water dowsing to then the informational dowsing, which also then once you pinpoint the location, I then switch to dowsing chart and the pendulum to then be able to ask questions of materials that they would be encountering and what depths, and if even any moisture is going to be encountered onto the target, and such as that one that produced, over 3,000 gallons a minute testing it. I mentioned to them at 250 feet they're going to hit a very good sized aquifer, and I forget how many gallons a minute it would produce, but not near as much. And that when they hit it, just to keep going, seal it off, and keep going. And they were going to hit the quantity they needed down at 460 feet. And then in cleaning it out to not exceed 500. So they did that and came in real good. But it's so much of that I find also giving them information of what they're encountering all along the way gives the driller more confidence as he's going to such depths that on the way to such a depth they're encountering things that I mentioned on the way there, and which gives them the confidence to keep going and down to where I say. So one of the times that this driller called me asking about a well that he was drilling just where the landowner wanted it. It was for just a home application. He was hitting some very hard granite and rock that was tearing up his equipment, and so he called me to see if I was in the area to be able to come out and see if there was even anything there worth pursuing if they made it through this granite. And I told him that I wasn't in the area, that I was actually out on the East Coast near Boston, actually at Spoolers, and getting ready for the national convention up in Vermont. So he was a little disappointed that I was over 3,000 miles away and not there to be able to help him at that. But I reminded him that, able to answer his questions, and pulled out the chart and the pendulum. And while talking to him, I tuned into it and got a reading for how deep he was already. So I mentioned to him, I'm noticing that you're at this depth at this time. You're right. How did you know? I didn't tell you. I said, well, I just tuned into it, and that's what I got. And that got his attention. And then I got his attention a second time, and I told him what depth I detected that he hit that hard material. And so he's really beginning to listen. And so then I asked how much further he'd have to go if there's water there worth pursuing, how much further he'd have to go to be out of that hard rock. And it was less than 10 feet, I recall, and something like 7 feet, 6 or 7 feet. And he was happy to hear that. There wasn't that much further. And then I went on to the questions of would there be good potable water at reasonable depth to take care of the homeowner's needs, and even through the drought periods. And I have a lot more stipulations in the program that I don't always consciously call to mind, but it's in the program for the water dowsing. And so I got that there was, and I got a depth and told him how deep you'd have to go to then get to that good potable water. And also that there was a spot on the way where he was going to hit some moisture, but that's just a little moisture, not anything to be concerned of. And so he's writing all of this down. And towards the end of the phone call, he said, I wasn't really looking forward to going out and working on that anymore. I just wanted to move to another location. And not knowing if he'd, without talking to me, would run into the same problems. But knowing we only got that much more through this hard rock to go, I can't wait to get out there tomorrow and see if this comes through and such. So he went on, and I went on to the conference. And after I got done with the conference, later on he called me when I was back down at Spruilers and said that will that he was working on, he called me about, everything came in exactly as I said. And when he went out the next morning with his notes and met up with his helper with the notes of information, his helper asked if I came out the night before or something. Then he told the helper the story of calling me and where I was, and I just gave him this information over the phone. And then his helper, who was really curious about me from hearing the other story, said, "Oh no, this is really going too far now." And he told him, but wait, before I told him anything, he told me at what depth we are already, and at what depth we ran into this hard material. So let's see if we just got this much further to go, and sure enough, it happened. And then everything came in as I mentioned. And so he's telling me this story about the responses of his helper. And he says, now this helper is afraid to death of ever meeting me. He don't know what to think of all of this. And again, it's just amazing how so many people are so close-minded to this, and it's just beyond their reality of what can be. And even this driller with this stuff occurring, he's always wondering about how can this be. But when he needs help, he still calls me. And then a number of years beyond that, probably, I estimate about 3 years. Then it was in 2007 when in late September, early October, I was at a chapter meeting with Mary Marie in Phoenix with the Life Force chapter, and a newspaper reporter came to the meeting wondering about dowsing and what other applications, useful applications, would it be for the more common person, that's not into locating water or other items to drill for, what other applications to utilize it for, in more city life. And people mentioned things such as finding lost items, and I'd mentioned to them, again, underground utility location. And that, for an example, every backhoe operator should be well practiced in dowsing and have a set of L rods on the backhoe, for they use such services as the blue stake locators to come out and mark where different underground utilities are, to be cautious around as they're digging. And they don't always have everything in their records as to what's there, and then there's catastrophes. So to give backhoe operators more confidence, if they were well practiced in dowsing, even though they got all the markings from the person coming out and blue staking it, if they were to walk their line and make additional notes of just anything that they may be locating, such as what I've experienced myself is abandoned lines. And you're going along and you hit it, and not knowing if it's abandoned or something very critical, it takes time to then, investigate and see if it's something that needs repairing, if it was damaged, and so on. While if you know of these things yourself and cautious when approaching it and being able to get in there by hand before causing any damage, at least overall the whole project can go much faster and spare the catastrophes. So I was sharing this with him, and he was asking about examples of doing this. And it just happened that at that time, I was just finishing up on a project of putting the overhead utilities in one section of a neighborhood all underground for 8 homes in this area, in this neighborhood where I'd had designed and built a home for a friend some years before. And so he came out that next day or so on a Monday to see this. And so I was able to actually demonstrate it of utilities that had been underground at times, and then those that we had just done and buried. So he can actually see it in practice and see it where things are obvious and they're not obvious, and follow things and see where they come to the surface. And so he was fascinated with that, and then my friend was there also, and he was asking my friend about all of this and if he was into it. And he said, well, I'm into it now since doing all this with Clay. But originally I was very skeptical about all of this until he was able to locate things that others didn't know about. And sure enough, there the things were. And even the things that were marked and known about and coming up to known points, such as sewer lines, and then there are cleanouts. And often the cleanouts would be on a 45 off of the main run and then elbow up to the surface. So where you'd see it coming out of the ground would not be in line with the main line. And so he would laugh at me when I'd be getting indications that wasn't in line with where things are coming out of the surface. But then when we had to dig them up and intercept them, find that what I was detecting was correct. And that's when he got into it more and practicing with it and getting to be able to do it just for his own water lines and sprinkler lines and such. And now is totally into it, while before he just originally was laughing it off. And so the reporter found this all interesting, and then my friend mentioned to him, though, where I lose it is when he pulls out a map and starts map dowsing. And the reporter was fascinated by that, so I gave him some examples, and I told him the story about this driller that called me when I was on the East Coast, while he's on the West Coast, and gave him that whole story. And he was very fascinated, and again, in half disbelief, and he asked me, do you have this driller's phone number so I can call him right now and get his take on this? I said, sure. And I gave him the number, and he called him right there, and he had him on speakerphone and was talking to him and got the same thing that I was telling him. And that's also where the real driller went into more detail of saying what his helper was thinking too, being skeptical and his responses to this. And he ended up publishing this in the newspaper, and came out just, I believe, within a week of when we were having that Southwest Conference up in Flagstaff in the Arizona newspaper. So others that didn't know about dowsing or knew about it and not of us, just like me in 1990, were able to come to the conference and learn more about it. So that felt good to be able to do that. And since then it's just been a continuation of doing more well dowsings. I think it was around 2009 that was a few of us were contacted that were in the Sedona area about a developer that needed a well down near Tombstone, Arizona. It was during the hot summer, and I was one that was available to be able to run down and do that. And the town of Tombstone was on water rationing, and they were having to haul water in even. And this 250-acre parcel near Tombstone needed water for a dude ranch they wanted to put in. So ended up giving them 2 locations and the information on all of it, and they drilled in the spot that it was most convenient for them, and then ended up having water, even though the town was hurting for water. And just several occasions over the years come up like that to go out and find water for people, and I've done that throughout the Southwest. And over the years when Ed and Carolyn lived there in Sedona, I was able to go out with Ed when I was visiting and work with them on some too. And here around Quartzsite, outside of town where people get land, they would call me and have me located for them. And the local drillers around here, again, were not thinking much of it, but one of them in particular that, several times, had to come, and at the depths that I told them, they're not so skeptical anymore. And it's also interesting with lost items and pets. And in fact, one situation when I was in 2004 on my way to the West Coast Conference in Santa Cruz, they were going through Sonoma. In the traffic, my trailer I was towing started ripping, and before I knew it, as it was going from one side to the other behind me, everybody cleared out around me, and next instant I knew, I was looking at the front of all the vehicles behind me as the trailer was towing me backwards down the freeway. And It went off to the shoulder of the freeway, and when the tires then came to the asphalt curb of the shoulder, then that caused it to then roll and went down this hillside, landing right side up down at the bottom. And the truck and trailer were still connected. There were trees at the rear of the trailer and at the front of the truck, but no bumpers were touched. Just went right down between the trees. And in order to get it out of there, had to disconnect the trailer from the truck. And I was very amazed at how good that hitch held things together. But had it disconnected and moved the tongue of the trailer so then it could move the truck and the trailer to wriggle them out of there. But when all this happened, I had a cat that would travel with me that came to me one time there outside of Sedona down at Cottonwood one year in the year 2000. In fact, after one of the Southwest conferences in 2000. And this cat would travel with me and ride beside me on the seat on my lap. But when it rolled, the windshield popped out, and when everything stopped, the cat was gone. I couldn't find the cat anywhere. But when everything settled down, I looked up the hillside to the freeway. I could see several people standing up there on their cell phones. So rather than calling 911, I figured that's already done. I called Barry Smith, where I was heading to at the time in San Jose, and it was 5 a.m, and he called 3 other dowsers, one that was right there in Sonoma, and another there in Fremont, Don Harmon, and they were on site before anybody else, any emergency services, and helping me with things. And so through all of you dowsers, I really come to see what true friends are really about, and to come and help in such a situation. And then when the medics did get there, they wanted to, haul me off, but I signed a waiver to get them out of there. And then another dowser later on took me to a hospital to see what was happening with my back, which turned out to be a fractured vertebrae. So 5 hours later, learned of that. But couldn't find the cat anywhere. And 2 days later, when I got out of the hospital, one of them brought me back over to that area to try to find the cat. And then Susan Spooler and Tom, they also, when they got into the area, right before the conference, was able to try again. But in the dowsing, kept detecting that the cat was over in an area where there was no trespassing, for it was in the jurisdiction of the city and county of San Francisco for the water department. So went on to the conference and came back several weeks later and still the same kind of results. And after several months, a lot of what I was picking up on was that the cat was pretty shook up and just didn't want to probably be with me at that time to travel and come across any situation like that again. But then 2 years to the day, I was coming back through there, and I had this strong indication to stop by an animal shelter to get this cat. And there was a couple of months when I first lost her, and after the conference, I'd go to an animal shelter 8 miles from there near Pleasanton, and another one about 8 miles over in Fremont. And the people in the shelters got to know me. And this one over in Pleasanton, when I was sharing with her how I lost the cat, doubted that the cat would maybe even be alive and just go ahead and adopt one of these other cats. And I explained to her that I don't need a cat. I don't even have a place at this time to keep any animal while I'm recovering. And I'm just looking for this cat, for I figure it'd be missing me. And if it's looking for me, I want to be here to get it. And now it's 2 years later, and I get the strong feeling to go by this animal shelter. And logically, I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. 2 years, you don't know, except they're dowsing, if the cat's even alive. But looking at the logical side, and if it is still alive, what's the odds in this window of time that it would be there at the shelter? And they only keep them for maybe 30 days before they put them down. But going down the interstate and looking at it intuitively, I was getting that she was there, getting the strong vibe. So I thought, okay, it'll only take a few minutes to pull off and go over there and see. So I did, and went into the animal shelter and into the room where the cats are caged. And as I'm going into the room, different cats, then they start crying for attention, hoping to be adopted. And so I said something. And as soon as I said something, I heard this familiar cry I didn't hear before. And I said something again, and she responded again. So I kept talking as I'm walking closer to where I'm hearing her. And I look into the cage, and there she is. And we're both just stunned when we see each other. So here we're able to find each other. First, her recognizing my voice, and me recognizing her cry. And then we see each other. And so I open the cage up and pull her out, and she's cuddling up to me and just so happy. And then in walks this lady. Says, I remember you. Have you got another cat yet? I said, no, not yet. But that cat really likes you. And I haven't seen that cat like that with anybody before. It's been here 3 weeks, and it just doesn't seem to like people, but it seems to really like you. And you should really go ahead and adopt it. And then I said, I think I will. And she about passed out, and now I'm going to finally adopt a cat. And to adopt an animal is only $15. While to reclaim an animal, one, they'd want to see proof, and I didn't have any evidence. And then the bad part, though, is they want to charge $50 instead of $15, and then a daily fee for keeping it. So it would have been a fortune. So I'll go ahead and adopt it. And she said one thing, though, is that any animal to leave here has to be spayed or neutered. And if this happens to have been done, then you could go ahead and have it. And twice a week, a veterinarian comes through to check on those that people are interested in. And in fact, was supposed to have been in here this morning and never came. And now it's Friday afternoon. And she said, you'll have to wait till next week. Well, the conference is going to be coming up. I'll be the following week getting ready to then head to Santa Cruz. It was just a week away. And so she's telling me all of this, And I'm thinking how sad it would be to have to leave the cat there. And so she's telling me this, and next thing, in walks the veterinarian. And she said, oh, what a coincidence. Here's the veterinarian. You could go ahead and verify whether it's been, in this case, spayed. And looked at it and said, yes, it's been done. So you could go ahead and take this cat home with you today. And, okay, we'll do that. So I put the cat back in its cage and go out to the front desk to fill out all the paperwork and everything. And then the cat, got this sad cry, like, where are you going? And so just talking to it as I'm going away, trying to calm it, and go out and do the paperwork and come back in with the box that they give to carry it out and set the box down and get the cat back out. And then I go to put the cat in the box, and all four legs go out and doesn't want to go in the box. So I just lay the box down, on its side on the floor and put the cat next to it and say, we've got to go. And then the cat walks into the box, and I pick it up and close it, and we're able to go. Took it out to the car to get it used to the car, and I called my parents, who live up about 30 miles from the northern entrance of Yosemite, so it's hours away, and called them up and told them what just happened, and they find it very hard to believe, but telling them I'm on the way to this conference and need to do something now with this cat I just got back. Well, I didn't have the motorhome with me. I'd left it up there in the hills at Ralph Squire's place, and they said, well, you can go ahead and bring it up here and leave it with us. And it was coincidentally that 2 years before, a couple of weeks before I had that accident and lost it, my parents had taken care of it for a few weeks when I had flown out to the East Coast and stayed with Spruilers to, again, do the recording with them at the National Convention. And so the cat was familiar with my parents and their place just before this whole thing happened. Now 2 years later, there it returns. So I headed on over that direction, which was several hours, and pulled up there at my parents, and they came out of the house and down up to the car, and in disbelief, they're just looking and saying, how do you know it's the same cat? And I rolled the window down, and they're looking in, and the cat's just calmly on my lap. And I asked them, how many cats would be this calm after several hours riding in the car? It's just, and then picked up the cat, opened the door, and we went on into the house, set it down, and it knew just where to go to be fed and watered, or had some food for it and all. And then a little while later, it did what I had trained it to years before, and instead of a litter box, I trained it to the toilet. And several hours later, it knew in their house the bathroom and the toilet. And my parents, this whole time saying, yeah, over and over again, this is definitely the same cat. So that was so rewarding to be able to get that cat back. And, for the years to follow, as we would travel again and to a lot of the same locations as before, the cat always knew the different places and people and even other animals and neighborhoods where I went to and such. And it was just so neat. Different people would be in disbelief, but when they would see how that cat would be as before, then they would know. And so, in that, I'm not sure what else to lead into with the various forms of dowsing and the experiences. If we wish, we could even open it up to questions and more open discussions, unless it could jog my memory of other experiences, things I could speak of. You have any ideas, Ed?
I'll invent some here in a few minutes.
Okay. But
So,
yeah, with that cat, it was so fun.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. For instance, there was this location with a friend in Phoenix where I would park in another friend's driveway with the motorhome often. And the cat got to know another cat that lived across the street. And for the 2 years that I was coming back without my cat, this other cat across the street would always come over when I'd pull up and park to greet my cat. And it was always sad to not find my cat there. Well, now after finding my cat, it had been 3 years since they've seen each other. And I pulled up there and got parked and opened the door of the motorhome, and my cat came out. And the lady across the street that knew the story of losing my cat saw this cat come out of the motorhome and yelled across the street, "Oh, you got another cat?" And I said, "No, this is the same cat. I found it." And I says, "No way, that can't be." And she's walking across the street to see it, has her cat behind her, and my cat makes eye contact. They see each other, and as she's coming across the street, her cat's running across and passing her, coming across the street, and my cat's running to see it, and they meet each other in the yard where I'm parked, and they're just so happy to see each other. And she's saying, "That's definitely the same cat, but my cat doesn't like just any other cat." For them to come together when they see each other like this, and my cat's not just friends with just any other cats or animals either, and to see that, it's just so neat to see different things like that over the years happen. It's just so touching. So, but, yeah. Anything else, Ed?
Yeah, Clay. Pardon me. You've got some information here on certain oil and gas things that you've found, and gold, and some things there that might be really interesting to grab hold of one of those if you'd like.
Okay. Yeah, I've been spending the winters here in Quartzsite with all the snowbird RVers, people that come down here from the northern states and Canada to hang out where it's warmer through the winter. And this is where I end up being so busy with doing a lot of solar installations on RVs and repairing their electrical problems and inverters and different electrical components. And while down here, I also have come to know quite a few people that hang out that like to go out metal detecting, locating gold out here in the desert, around where there's a lot of old mines and just, washes where, bits of gold and nuggets wash down. And for those that I know the best, where I tend to hang out, I've told them of what I can do, so we would take maps and I map dows for them and show them on the topographical maps, the best spots for them to go out and do their metal detecting. And one of them in particular has gotten better at being able to then douse so that I'm able to not have to go out with them and, get him physically more in the area and just tell him on the map the area to go, and they'd run out. It's out there for miles on their prods on these dirt trails. And then he'd take his rods from where they'd park and go and pinpoint more of the area, and then go around metal detecting and dig up these nuggets. And they find them anywhere from whether it's just a few penny rates, just fractions of an ounce, and anywhere from near the surface to 3 or 4 inches deep for the small ones, or for the bigger nuggets, they go down 12 or 18 inches even. And several of them, by doing this, have been able to get quite a bit of gold. And then amongst them, they trade and barter, whether it's, metal detectors that they're trading. And this particular person and another one in the group has even traded a good quantity of gold that they found for their motorhomes. So they're doing quite well with it, even though it's just a hobby, so you don't get too wrapped up in it. It's just a hobby, but to be able to find some quantity, so they trade amongst themselves gold for the motorhomes. And that's quite neat. So I've gotten to be quite known in this area, for both the dowsing and as well as the electrical, diagnosing on RVs and also all the rest of the businesses in town. I help them out with their electrical problems, such as the laundromats now with the newer machines. They have the electronic controls in them, and they're having problems. I end up fixing the electronics within their machines and wheel changers and different things. So
Clay, when you douse for gold, what questions do you concentrate on?
Primarily where they would find the greatest concentration of the gold that they can pick up with their metal detectors, and away from a lot of the false targets, such as people that go around where they've been mining before, get a lot of false hits from the metal, from their equipment, and even from over 100 years ago, the old tacks from their boots. And this one guy was showing me this jar that like the old pickles came in. It's just full of nothing but boot tacks. That wow. They'll be going along, getting these, the soundings of gold, and the machines they use give different sounds depending on the minerals that they're hitting. But they're getting these interruptions from all these other little bits of metal that then they want to, dig up and get out of the way so they can focus and concentrate on the gold. And so, besides finding where there's a concentration of it that's obtainable at a fairly shallow depth, is also focusing on where there's the least interruptions from all this other debris. And so that's something that they find interesting too, that you can define such things and zero in onto better areas and let other people have the areas where there's more debris, where they go sweeping through with finding all this stuff, and let them get a lot of the junk out of the way before then I may be detecting that now that's a reasonable place to go look, where they'll have less interruptions from the debris. So
definitely.
Clay?
Yes.
Yeah, you've been really excellent at map dowsing and remote dowsing. Is there one thing that might pop into your mind that was really special in a way? Is there something reasonable there?
The main thing was the example that I'd given with, this driller.
Yeah.
I was hoping I was in the area, and yet I was over on the opposite coast. And,
yeah.
Just how surprised he was that didn't matter. And, he was very skeptical that was possible until I told him what depth I was detecting that he was at already.
Mm-hmm.
And then 2 out of 2 to be able to tell him what depth he ran into that hard rock. And then he was willing to give it a try for the rest of the information I gave him. And then after that, he doesn't question anything of what I tell him on the rest of the jobs. And he said, though, since all this has happened, that the number of people that he's told these stories to, it's as unbelievable that they are. If he were to give me $1 for every time he tells any one of these stories, that I'd be quite rich just from that. But yeah.
So Clay, how do you explain dowsing to people that don't know about it?
I primarily explain that even if it's more of a single aspect of the higher consciousness, that at least if that's hard to grasp, with the field dowsing, you could just visualize the differences in the energies that one could be picking up on while you're walking around detecting these different things. And with those energies, that every type of mineral or item resonate at different frequencies, and just with your mind as a tuner, you just learn to focus and tune into the particular thing that you're trying to find, to try to discriminate against all the other items that could be giving you responses that you're not wanting to find. And just as with a poor radio tuner, like the old crystal sets, you could be getting multiple signals coming through where one's talking on top of the other. But the better the tuner, the better you can tune in to the one you're wanting to listen to and amplify that one, even if it's a weaker one, then be able to tune into it and amplify it and only get the information from that one station. Same thing here with dowsing, where you can tune into the one item and focus on that. And even though it may not be giving the strongest indication if compared to if you're just openly dowsing for all objects, even though it may not be the strongest, that with practice it'll become the only one that you'll be getting the response from. And then it's beyond that you get into the informational dowsing, which comes more with the spiritual growth of going through to the higher consciousness and asking, those of spirit, of the God source, the information, and that's why that no distance matters. Just ask them of the specifics of that particular location or item that you're wanting information on, and for that to come through using such an item as a pendulum and a chart for them to communicate to you that information. And that's where a lot of people that are not developed spiritually and have no clue of where you're coming from, can totally lose it and would have a hard time beginning to develop such a skill on their own until they, develop themselves spiritually and able to tune into the higher consciousness. So, but at least those that are not so developed spiritually can relate to more of the physical aspects of the field dowsing. And even if their consciousness is working through their consciousness to the higher consciousness, even in the field dowsing, through their mind, they're not having to relate to it that way. They have a simpler way to relate to it with, and it still works. Yeah.
Do you use samples of what you're looking for, like a sample of gold if you're dowsing for gold?
I've played around with that in the early stages, and early on when developing this, I found that it often aids me and the other people I'm teaching to be able to resonate with and focus on that particular item that they're looking for. And myself, though, after the years of doing this, I found that it doesn't really make any difference. I just, focus on the particular, and with all the practice and confidence from the experience that comes with it, it happens without having to have a witness and a sample to be able to resonate with and tune into. And a lot of people experiment with different lengths of L rods, for instance, to different types of minerals or utilities. And I've experimented early on with L rods from all different types of alloys of welding rods and playing with different lengths. And there again, I found that for the most part, for myself, it doesn't make any difference. Well, with people just learning, they may at first find one sort of rod or length easier than another. And a lot of people find it easier if the rod is going through a tube they can pivot in instead of just letting it pivot in their hand. So it's mainly comes down to the individuals and what they're most comfortable with and familiar with. But I always try to encourage everybody to just continue experimenting in all areas and develop it using all kinds of tools or rods and see what works best. And some have much better success, with getting responses using a rye rod instead of L rods. And some do really good with a bobber, which can move around so easily. And so it just varies for the individual, and from what I believe is a lot of their past experiences, whether subconsciously in this lifetime or what may be even coming through from previous lives, they are able to relate to different types of tools in the beginning differently. But to really get proficient, I always encourage to continue experimenting with all types and just get out there and do it. And the easiest thing to practice on that you can actually see from the ground is the utilities, where you focus on a particular one until you intercept it, and then ask what direction to go to where it comes out of the ground the soonest for you to verify, and then go in that direction that leads you until you see, sure enough, there it is coming out of the ground, and verify that it's the particular utility you're tuning into. And in the beginning, too often it's the wrong utility, but with practice, you get better at tuning into the particular one. And then with the utilities, you become more and more confident as you get better. And then you go to that's not so easy to verify, and just work along more blindly, if you will, and do it confidently. And then, of course, I was fortunate in the beginning when it came to the weld dowsing to be able to go out with other very experienced weld dowsers and just experiment with getting the same responses as they were, and then see it come in as such. So that then when I'm out there doing it by myself in the beginning, was able to get the same strong responses and be confident in the information I was getting. And then over and over again seeing it come through, it's just you learn to accept that you're getting good information from the higher source that you're tapping into.
Very good.
Thank you, Clay. That is excellent information. Thank you.
Excellent. So when you go out on a water dowsing job, what tools do you like to use the most?
I prefer just the L rods, and I usually bring out several sets and even different types so that the people that I'm working with, I can show them and have them experiment with it and try the different ones I have and see whether they get the same responses with all of them, or if they find one over the other in the beginning working better for them. And usually before we leave, they're getting the same responses no matter what the type is, so that they can then often I give them a set even, but if they're someplace and they don't have anything with them, I share with them just taking any piece of wire and doing the same thing, that it doesn't have to be these that I have. Just take a piece of wire and bend it into an L and use it. Yeah, but I find it easiest with the L rods too. And so often just one for the direction of the optimum location, and then I go, come at it from different directions to narrow in on the particular location. And then with two, I get to getting the direction that the vein happens to be running, and then follow it in one direction and then the other with just one. And then with two, it's going and spreading in opposite directions. Experimented with coming in from a distance to getting to the edge of it from both sides, and showing the client the example that it's not always, the best place to drill isn't necessarily in the center of where you're first detecting the edges of it being, that things aren't so symmetrical as a pipeline could be or a nice round tunnel. But often, the layers of material down there is, sloped granite or rock or different materials. And towards one side, it may be much more of a hollow triangle area to one side where the major water is flowing, and show them the different directions that it may be running, and sometimes they point out that on an adjacent piece of land where there's a well, and it's just the same vein, and at first I can informationally say, okay, yes, and then where I'm showing them how theirs is running near where I'm detecting the best location for the greatest ease of drilling, where they should drill, that as you're walking along it, it's not going in the direction of that other well. And then show them if we follow it, zigzagging around, it finally gets to that other well. And able to show them the direction of flow and whether you're upstream or downstream from where they're tapping into it. So it's always interesting to be able to show them that additional information besides just where and at what depth, and then even in forward drought years, how many gallons per minute they can expect to recover.
Great.
Yeah.
We could open it up for questions now if you'd like.
Okay.
Okay, so if you have a question, you can dial *6, and then that will unmute yourself. So then you can ask your question, and then if you'd mute yourself again after that, that'd be great. So if you have a question, dial *6.
Hi, Clay. This is Jean Geringer.
Hi, Jean.
How you doing? I'm so glad to hear about the cat.
Yes. Yeah, I'm doing great.
So I would like some contact information if you're doing any dowsing. In the last week, I've had a request for someone on the border between Arizona and New Mexico. He called me, wanted to see if I would help him find some treasure dowsing. I think that might be more up your alley. And I've got a couple of other people looking for water wells. And frankly, I have, other than I can call Sherry, of course, and see who's doing what where, who's even traveling. But if you're up to those, I don't know if you're still pretty mobile, or I don't know if you're still in a motorhome or what's going on.
Yes,
okay.
I'm very mobile with the motorhome. It's just at this time I'm, through the winter, always very busy in quartzite. Once in a while, I could maybe get away for a day on a weekend. But, that's a distance to go, but it may be possible. Otherwise, the best time is the springtime.
Okay. So what's the best way for me to contact you or have them to contact you?
The best way is just through calling me or texting me with the cell phone number.
Okay. What's that number?
Okay. yes, for any of you out there, that area code 209-985-4765.
Okay. Happy to send stuff your way.
Okay.
And it's really good hearing you.
Yeah, thank you. It's fun being able to share a lot of this, too, help other people grow in their abilities to dowse.
Yes. Yes.
Good to have you on, Jeannie.
I will. Huh?
Good to have you on, I said.
I usually am. I'm just usually quiet. But I've been getting requests, and not many of us are able to get out and about with COVID, and I didn't know if Clay was. And that one on Treasure is right between Arizona and New Mexico. So, you know. Yeah. Super.
Okay.
Well, I will unmute or mute myself again so others can talk. But it's so happy to have actually witnessed your journey as we met you when you were brand new to it all these years later.
Yes. Yeah, and some of those times in the 90s, I got to get some insight into the treasure dowsing through Oscar Branson.
Right. Yeah. And Louis Matasia for whatever he was ever really wanting to share, if you could really get him to share anything.
I had some adventures with him out there in the eastern states. That was very good, too.
Well, I will get off now so other people can get on. It's good to hear everybody.
Good to hear you, too,
Hi. I'm Rita in Washington, D.C. Is there someone else that I heard before me?
No, go ahead, Rita. You're next.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you so much, Clay, for sharing. I was wondering if you had to establish any protection so that you wouldn't have any interference while you were dowsing. Do you do any kind of preemptive protection or any invocation or as a protection for your dowsing? Thank you.
I had, on my earlier years in dowsing, done that quite often, and it's very much part of my subconscious programming. And now it's primarily when I get out and into the mode of dowsing, thanking those of the higher source and spirit guides that may be checking in the particular specialties, just thanking them for being and keeping anything negative away. But it's very much established within my higher consciousness now and subconscious. But that's a very good point to bring up for those that are getting into this, is to establish good spiritual protection.
Yeah, I have myself on a loop where I just have it as a habit, but it's interesting to hear that on a subconscious level now for you, as you've matured, it's just become a part of just your process without having to articulate it. But okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Nancy, you're next.
Okay. Clay, I was wondering one of the questions was, what's your kitty's name?
Actually, the cat was named Spirit.
Spirit.
And I lost Spirit a number of years ago, when it was running from a dog, actually. And so ended up losing it. And I've had another cat since, but it's since decided also not travel. So I'm just always open for any such creatures to come along that wants to join me and travel about. But it was actually named it Spirit.
That's a beautiful name. I'm sort of getting pushed out of my house into potentially more of a mobile life by I become extremely electromagnetically sensitive, and a cell tower has been surrounding my house a little ways out in the country for 9 months now, and I have not been able to get that changed. And I've just purchased an old aluminum travel trailer, and I'm mitigating that. And I was interested. I was just listening. I'm trying to make the transition from what has been my old life into something new. I don't know what is in store for me, but I have to make it safe from radio frequencies. And you said that you do things on remediation for electrical stuff and solar. I want to call you about that after maybe tomorrow, another time. But it was encouraging to me to hear that, you know, you have a nice lifestyle being mobile. And it gave me an idea, your dowsing, map dowsing. I've not really done that. Looking for places to go. Is that something you do?
Yes, I do that quite often as I'm traveling about in the summertime. Such as this last summer, I covered 8 states while being able to avoid populated areas and large crowds because of the pandemic and people being fearful of all of this.
Right.
And so often I douse just what direction to go and where to look to camp. There's various apps one can access now on their phones or tablets as to different campgrounds, and then through dowsing of those that you're getting information on, getting greater information on which one you should pursue.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of places one can resort to besides campgrounds, including farms and ranches and such that are included in these various travel groups where they
what
invite
I have to find is places that are low in radio frequencies where there's not much cell towers, and I don't know how to find those places.
Well, through the dowsing. Later on, if we want to go into more detail on that, we could.
Okay, by phone.
Yeah, and one thing I should add is, during these winter months where I'm very busy doing especially the weekdays until, especially from 9 to 4, it's best to contact me in the evenings or on weekends, and then I can have more time to spend sharing this. But one thing I really enjoy with this RV lifestyle is being able to be out and away from, the stronger utilities and areas of, radio signals. And then in my living environment, I very seldom anywhere where I'm plugged into the grid. And I just turn on the inverter that converts the 12 volts from the batteries to 120 AC when I need to use an appliance, such as a toaster oven or the regular toaster or vacuum cleaner. Then I turn it on and use it. And then when I'm not using such appliances, then I'm able to turn it off. And then my whole environment, and especially during the times of being in one place for hours, at the bed sleeping, I don't have any of that 60 hertz around me. I'm free of all of that in my immediate area.
We have one more question for you. We just have time for one more question. Dorothy, it's your turn. Dorothy, you have a question?
*6.
Yeah, she's already unmuted.
Yes, I'm sorry. My name's Ed. I'm with Colorado Mile High Dowsers. And I'd like to ask Clay a question about moving water. Had several neighbors that have had water that has shifted away from their well, maybe 2 feet, some as far as 8 feet. And I can typically bring it back to the well, and some of them have been recharged, others haven't. and I douse that the water is below the pump and not able to get to the pump. I'm unable to bring the water to the pump. Do you have any ideas, or have you done this as well?
I've moved water before, and been with Harold McCoy when he was around while he's done it, and he's always given great demonstrations with even doing it remotely. But when it turns out that then it's below the level of the well, you're working against conventional physics, at least, with having it have the pressure to get up to the well, such as if along that vein that's lower than the well height, before it gets there, it's starting off someplace at a greater height that's equal to or greater than the depth of the well. If it doesn't have such strong flow past it to where it can generate some pressure, theoretically you can get it up to that height of the well. Otherwise, the other real physical solution is to have them come in and drill that well down to that depth that water is currently, and even if it's not in alignment with the well, at least get down beyond that depth and then move it over to be in alignment with the well. That's my main suggestions on taking care of that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Clay. Okay, everybody, that's the last question we have time for. So we're going to do a little wrap-up here. And let's see, the next Water Dowsers conference call is going to be on the 19th of November. So we hope you all join us in on the line then. So I'd like to turn this over now to Jeanette from the Reading Dowsers.
Hi, thank you so much, Sherry and Ed, for putting this program on. And I feel so delighted, Clay, that we had a time to actually get to know you. Just like Ed said in the very beginning, we always see you, the AV guy, the tech guy, helping. And it was so nice for people who don't know you. We get to know you. And as Jeannie said earlier, it's great to see you, change after all these decades. Thank you so much. What I take away from really getting to know you a little bit more is I appreciate your authenticity, but mostly you are living an example of experimenting. You started learning how to douse when you were 13, and you talked about experimenting, and you showed how to experiment. You mentioned for us to experiment, and why? Because we can gain a little more confidence. It gives us an ability to tap into our higher selves. And certainly, you mentioned so many other dowsers were right there ready to help you. And I can't say how much I appreciate these dowser conferences, because I got to meet some beautiful people just like yourself. And it is a happy dowsing family. And learning from John Wayne Blassingame, who's been doing this for decades, hearing the story, I could just see John Wayne teaching. And here you were in the beginning of dowsing, and then you dowsed in 2003 an orchard, almond orchard, potential orchard almond orchard, and you get 1,500 gallons per minute. But really, you got 3,000 gallons per minute. That's amazing. But you also demonstrated an example of, just because you make it look easy, and I've seen this before, the client thinks, oh, well, I think we can do it over here. So everyone gets to learn. There's more difficulty with rocks. The quality of water might not be the same. And maybe, their learning lesson is they kind of took the dowser for granted, because you made it look easy. But it was a confirmation. And what is also important is everybody can learn from Clay this remote dowsing. Here he is, hundreds of miles away, back east, and he's at the Spooler household. And he's telling his client, well, no, you can douse, right here. This is what you're going to find at so much depth. That is an excellent example of just tuning in. And it's something I had not heard from one of the other guests we've had, is that you want to focus on the least interruptions. And whether that radio frequency, it has other channels, but if you hone in, then you can find that magical treasure. And for your instance, you mentioned the gold earlier. So you were creating the greatest concentration without so many interruptions, whether it was from boot tax or it was some other interference. And thanks for, everyone should know where ground utility wires could be, because it could be helpful, especially with the ever-changing world, and that is an asset to have, and we never know who we can be helping, whether it's ourselves or our neighbor. And of course, this is an indication. You can just you can get an immediate confirmation. Well, show me where this line is going if you're looking for any particular underground wire. And lastly, I have to say that is one of the best cat stories I've ever heard, and so many testimonials. It was a feel-good. It should be a Hallmark movie. It's just so beautiful how you were tuning in to your intuition, that internal dowsing organism within yourself, that higher self, and even the cat and you were getting that magnetic pull. And there were so many, over a dozen people in that cat's journey and your journey that confirmed that both of you were meant to be together. Just beautiful, and the way you explained it was excellent. And thank you, Clay. We love you. We appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you more. And at the next big conference, that Southwest Conference. Sherry?
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, I think maybe some people might like your contact information. So if you'd like to give out your phone number and maybe your email address, whatever you want to give out, go ahead.
Okay. I'll give out the phone number again, which is area code 209-985-4765. And evenings and weekends are the best to contact me on it. Otherwise, you may end up just leaving a voicemail message. And my email, which I'm not always that great at checking, maybe just instead of every day, sometimes it gets into being just 2 or 3 times a week. It's the number 4 for claysmith at gmail.com.
So that's number 4, claysmith at gmail.com?
Yes.
Okay. And the phone number is 209-985-4765. So I hope
That's
you
correct.
all enjoyed this, and thank you so much, Clay. Do you have any last-minute comments?
No. Just hope that with what I was able to share, that you can get out there more and practice and, just really get good at it as you refine your skills at dowsing and growing spiritually and tuning into the higher source. And to remember that to douse is to have divine oneness with spiritual energy. And the dowser has divine oneness with spiritual energy resonating. The dowser.
Thank you.
And as you tune into the higher source and come into the light, come into God's light and let in God's highest truth. Look at the word light. It's let in God's highest truth. And to ask, always seeking knowledge. Ask. Okay.
Beautiful. Ed,
Beautiful.
did you have a comment? Ed, are you still on the line?
Oh, yes.
Okay. Did you have a last-minute comment there before we sign off?
I'm so very pleased that Clay has done an excellent information for us. It's very, very useful. Thank you, Clay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I was happy I was able to share all this with all of you.
Yes, and we are pleased too.
Yeah, this is very valuable information. We always learn something from every dowser. And, of course, next month is the 19th of November for our next call. We hope you'll join us then. Okay. And thank you very much, and good evening, everybody.
Hey, Mom?
Yeah.
Real quick, I just thought I should just give them my email address in case somebody wants to get a hold of me about a map or something. Okay. And it's simply DanielHope@gmail. And if somebody wants to call me instead, it's just simply 530-781-2345.
Okay, Dan, so that's 530-781-2345. Okay, yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed this. Something else, Dan?
No, I was just going to say it could be about business cards. It could be about maps, whatever. Okay.
Yes, Dan has made a lot of things for me over the years, like business cards and cards with charts on them. And so he's very talented. So if you need anything, just give him a call.
I was just
dowsing
with chart earlier today, the laser chart that Dan made, and I thank you so much, both of you. Very helpful and handy.
Good. Yeah, I just told Dan what I needed, and he designed it and then used the laser cutter to cut them out. So they're very nice.
And you're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Jean. Thanks, Jeanette. I appreciate your wrap-up there. It's very thorough. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for attending. Thanks for making this happen, and I'm grateful for everyone participating, and I get to learn just as much as everyone else. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank all of you for having me share. It's great.
Oh, thanks for all your everything you did share. It's great. Mm-hmm. Appreciate it.
Yes, indeed. Clay, it is. Thank you.
Okay, I am going to unmute everybody if you want to say goodbye to Clay and everybody. So.
Hey, Clay.
Thank
Thanks a lot. Carl's here.
Hey, Clay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Clay. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you for joining us. You're welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bye. I'm a new dowser. I'm a new one coming. I'm trying to learn dowsing, but I was online. I listened to everything.
Just a minute. Hold on.
Thank you for it. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. Okay, so join the Clay.
Common Susan Spooler.
Okay. Hi, Susan. Bye-bye. Susan Spooler, it's done so much. Thank you.
Yeah. Definitely.
So you, Clay. Oh, my God.
That's your dog.
Good evening.
Can I say something?
What's
Hello?
that? Who's that? Yeah, I hear you.
It sounds like the best thing to do if you want to be a good dowser, you got to do a lot of practice. Did I get that right?
Yep. Lots of practice.
Practice.
Okay,
Right.
Thank you. I'll do that.
Yeah. And be confident.
That's right.
You. Good night.
Okay.
Good night.
I'm signing off. Bye-bye.
Good night.
Okay, Clay, we had 60 people on tonight.
Oh, great.
Yes. Okay, good. Okay, so there's still 11 people on right now. And so I'm going to turn the recording off.